got Bucky O'Neill coming on in just a second. He's hanging out with me. He's in the green room behind the scenes, so you guys will see him in just a minute. Before that, I'm talking to you because you're becoming your greatest possible self. So I acknowledge you, I honor you, I love you. Keep showing up, keep doing your absolute best every single day, every single moment, because that's who you are, okay? Anything I can do to support you, let me know, whether it's being a guest on the 12-hour marathon, getting your message out, whether it's coming to one of our live retreats, whether it's, getting with Bucky, taking the next steps with him, growing yourself with the science of personal development and transformation. My goodness gracious, find what resonates with you and take those next steps, because that's how magic is created. Miracles in your life, and you wake up one day and you're like, how the heck did I create this beautiful, abundant masterpiece? Well, it's one step at a time. So thanks for showing up here. And I'm going to talk about the iTunes review of the week. Jen Hudgens says, love this podcast. This podcast is so motivating. I love the caliber of guests and the energy that Chris brings to the show each and every time. Thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate you. And if you want to get a chance to get shouted out on a future 12-hour live stream, go to beergps.com/iTunes or search Greatest Possible Self on the iTunes store, and you can give us a review like that, and you'll get a chance to be entered into the raffle, so to speak. And I just love you so much. Thank you for being here. Subscribe to the show if you're listening to this episode so you can get all the latest updates, okay? I'm going to introduce Bucky in just a second here. Before that, though, grab a piece of paper, grab a pen. We're going to go deep into the science so that you can actually apply this stuff and really have it make a difference in your life. And definitely stick around all the way through to the end of this interview and all these interviews, because they're epic. And, just be ready to have this one piece of information, the one aha. I always like saying I got 5 of the dials of the lock dialed in. I just need one more. I'm like almost there at that combination. Bucky could have that transformational piece of information that blows everything open for you. So keep tuning in. Let's introduce him, and then we will rock it out, because Bucky O'Neill mentors experts to build signature online trainings and world-class transformational retreats. He represents a new generation of personal development services, courses, and technologies. And whether you are struggling in your personal life or looking to create a passion-based business with transformational products and services, Bucky and his expert team can get you the results you have been dreaming about. And we are blessed to have him here with us today. We're going to rock it out on this interview about for the next hour. Bucky, are you ready to bring the heat, my man?
Let's do it, man. Let's do it.
We are live on Become Your Greatest Possible Self, brother. Thank you for being here. We're going to dive right into the theme of today, which is transformational travel, man. What does that mean to you, Bucky?
Oh, man, it means a lot of things. I think about all the events I've been to. I think about all the places that I've bbeen. I spent so much time on my own in the process of travel, whether it was touring the world speaking or these solo trips or whatever it was. There's so much transformation that can happen in an individual's life or at an event just from going to a significant place, let alone the metaphor of how we travel within transformation. And within that space, it kind of the play on words of like, who I've become through my processes, who I've become by going through these different experiences and being in these different rooms and these different environments, the travel that we've gone. I a while back, I did that 10-year challenge. And sometimes I look back on my life and I'm like, man, who was I? Who was I 2 years ago? Who was I 3 years ago? Serious traveling happening.
And especially like today, man, I really acknowledge the conscious, light working entrepreneurs, people who are like day in and day out, like working on ourselves, shaping, crafting, chiseling away the excess, the stuff that we no longer need to really shine our light even brighter, man. Like we're like doing the work, and the results that produces in our lives as well as the people around us lives, man, is absolutely epic. So dude, I honor you for the impact that you've made traveling, developing yourself, mentoring, coaching, and helping people put on like epic events, man. It's super, super awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm super grateful to be here. It sounds like, this is my first time on the show, but I'm excited to be here and I'm excited to share with your audience. And there's a real power in the things that we're going to talk about today when it comes to differentiating yourself, when it comes to designing your signature message, impacting people in a really deep way, and growing your business in exponential ways that you can never imagine. This idea of competition, right? This is the shift. This was what pulls you out of competition mode, and this puts you into the, I know it's cliche by now, but it puts you into that blue water space of innovating. Hey, what is it that I do better than anybody else in the world? And how do I provide that value? So it's going to be an exciting conversation.
Dude, I love it, man. So, why don't you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit more about your journey, man? I mentioned your intro, who you are, what you stand for, but
Yeah.
how did personal development, business, how did it all begin
Oh
for you,
man.
bro?
When I say next generation, I actually mean it, right? So I'm second generation into this space. I grew up into it. I was literally that kid that was being passed around the seminar workshops, and very early on, I went to a youth program,
Okay.
and then became a youth mentor. And I was, I had all these different challenges. It's amazing to grow up with amazing parents that have, are conscious. And I was telling stories like, my mom used to make kombucha, and we'd eat organic food. And I
That's
was in the
so
fourth
awesome.
grade driving up from driving down to Del Mar, California, and I'd drive to school every single day. And on the way to school in fourth grade, we listened to like the Celestine Prophecy and things like this, right? Like
Yes,
this is the stuff that I grew up around, right?
dude.
And at the same
Wow.
time, I had all this stuff, and I had all this suppression.
Yep.
It's a big part of the work that I do now, but I had all this suppression, I had all this emotion. I didn't know how to deal with it, right?
Wow.
So, I was pretty distraught, and I was, self medicating and drinking a lot when I was in high school, and I felt like I had multiple identities, and personal development would just became a new home for me. And I say new home for me because before that, it was really about sports. It was about
Mm,
sports. It was about physical activity. How do I get my body moving in a way that I can not feel so much or not think so much. I could just totally be present. I also remember
mm,
times on those same drives when I was really young, just staring out the window. And I think I've always had a kind of a liking towards mindlessness, or, finding that void or finding that space in between the
yeah.
noise. So yeah, I had all these challenges in high school, and even in college, and really strong, issues with finding my identity and being a man and being who I am and all this kind of stuff. And then personal development hit me. And as I started to apply the principle that I've been learning, I watched my whole life transform. And it first started in academics, and that was kind of a real indicator of like, man, this stuff actually works.
Mm,
And as I started to apply these things, I dedicated myself to, it's so funny how we follow in our parents' footsteps, even
mhm.
subconsciously. It's like I remember so many times in my younger life how I resisted my father so much, and now
Wow.
I've become him. you know
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean? I'm doing like the exact same work that he's been doing.
Wow.
So it's fun to be here. And part of what happened was, in 2006 I became a professional speaker, started speaking all over the world, and as a result, people will come over to me and be like, man, this is an amazing event. It's one of the most transformational events I've ever been to.
Mm,
I have this passion. Can you help me to do these events? And that's really that this part of the
yeah.
business sparked and grew. Is like, man, people come up to me, I've never experienced anything like this. How are you doing this? And a lot of times when we go to events like that, we think it's about the individual. We think it's about Tony Robbins. We think it's
Mm,
about Deepak. We think it's about Chris or whatever it is. We think it's about the individual. And what a lot of people don't realize is that there's a science of transformation, and there's a step by
mm,
step process to deliver on outcomes that are meaningful and impactful. And it goes beyond just good planning or just organizing. It
mm.
goes into neuroscience. It goes into experience. It goes into all the sensory, all the senses, and how do you really produce a world class product and service.
So you were speaking, you said in like 2003? That's when you started in early
2006, I became
2006?
a youth mentor in 2000. I was 18
Wow,
years old. I became a youth
dude.
mentor in 2000. And I started, for 6 years, I was working with an organization called Super Camp, they were doing 10-day residential programs for students, about 125 students at Stanford, Villanova, all
Yeah.
these high end universities. And it was based in personal development. So we do a lot of emotional intelligence, a lot of self
Mm,
awareness stuff, a lot of
yeah.
goal setting, board breaking, trust exercises, ropes courses, things like this. And then we do academic strategy, speed reading, creative writing, all this really, really cool stuff.
Yeah.
And I did that for, I guess it was 2000 to 2006. And then I
Mm,
became a facilitator in 2006, where I was leading from the front of the room, and then a lead
mm,
facilitator in that same year. And then I started traveling all over the United States and all over Southeast Asia, to the point where in 2009, I was living in Southeast Asia probably 9 months out of the year.
wow.
I would teach for 8 or 9 months, and I'd travel for 3 months. And I did that up until 2016, with a bunch of different organizations, doing some adult programs, student programs, working with other people's events, helping them
Yeah.
orchestrate and do that whole thing. But yeah, just lots and lots of experience. I became, I had a little stint with the Chopra Center. I was the event manager over there for a little bit. I've done some consulting with Tony and his crew, and I've just been in the game. It's
Dude,
like I come
hard
from a lineage
hardcore, man.
of
Hard.
people who have been in the game, so
This is
I understand.
hardcore.
I
I want. I want
understand
to.
the
I want to know,
game.
when did the scientific aspect of transformation, like when did
Yeah,
that become a this is who I am. This is what I want to stand for. This is what I really want to communicate to people.
yeah. I think when you do something enough times, you start to see a pattern to it. You start to see the things that show up consistently. And for me, Super Camp, the youth program, was really geared towards education, but the piece that I was really passionate about was changing people's lives.
Mm.
So I knew it was possible because I was that story. I came from that environment where I had all this self-doubt, disbelief, and all this kind of stuff. And what I was being trained in is a process called accelerated learning. And accelerated learning, it's a long story, but it comes from a guy by the name of Georgy Lazanovs. And the story is that he was working in Bulgaria, had two different hospitals, and he was noticing that one hospital was having dramatically different results. And so he started to test and say, okay, well, what are the things that really make the difference? And he found out that everything generally was the same: doctors, equipment, service, everything. But the one major difference was at one hospital they were playing Baroque music. He goes on to study
Mm.
that Baroque music, it has the rhythms of the heart, and it puts people into a healing state within the body, and causes better results. And that birthed an obsession for him to figure out what are all the things within a social environment, emotional environment, a physical environment that influences an outcome, specifically learning. So from that standpoint, I then started to say, okay, well, how do you do that same thing but for transformation?
Hmm.
Because transformation was what my heart was set on. I became, the story goes on, but I became a firewalk instructor in 2008 and started leading people through these exercises that are called extreme spirituality by the guy by the name of Tully Burkhan. So firewalking, glass walking, board breaking, all the kinds of high end stuff, because I was super passionate about you know what happened to me in my life, which was I immersed myself into environment and something shifted, and I couldn't go
Mm.
back home and be the same person.
Yeah.
And I know that I've been to places and I've been to programs where I could go back home and be the same person. But what I was doing over these long stints, so I'd work, 3 months in a row, 6 months in a row,
Yeah.
9 months in a row. We do, 10, 15 programs straight, 10 days residential. And I'd be in this altered state the entire time.
Mm.
And part of my obsession, when you do something consistently over and over and over again, it's like, how can I do this better? How can I do this better? How can I get better results? And that, with the foundation of accelerated learning,
Mm.
caused a really easy shift to say, okay, these are the things that you can do every single time. Here's all the things that you control and influence in order to produce deeper results for your
Mm.
participants. And that was the big thing.
Dude, this is so powerful. We have a ton of coaches, authors, speakers in the audience who want to create more impact, more influence, and have like
Yeah.
science on their side so that they're doing what is going to create the biggest, net positive result. What do they need to know, man? What do they need to know about the science behind this transformation?
Yeah, I think the first thing that they need to know is, I'll go back a little bit and I'll set a little bit of context, is that
Sure.
part of the reason why this is so powerful, and it kind of goes into the header of this talk, of how I was able to bring people, and I'm able to bring people to multi six figures, $500,000 businesses within 6 months. Obviously there's a lot of intangibles in that, but I'm going to speak specifically about transformation. Right, the intangibles are like, they're an expert, they're really good at what they do, they produce
Right.
amazing results.
Right.
Right, like that's number one, has to be a must. They
Right.
know who they are, they're willing to put in the work, both
Mm.
external and internal. Right, because everybody
Yeah.
knows that growing a business is going to stretch you like crazy. Right,
Yep.
so they're willing to do that. They're consistent. They're willing to invest in a mentor and say, hey, you know what,
Mm.
this is the person. I'm going to do exactly what they tell me to do. I'm going to follow through on that. Right,
Boom.
so those are some of the intangible things that you have to have in place. They know who they are. They're willing to do the work. They're willing to invest in a mentor. All these kind of things. Right.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about the transformational piece, and a lot of people don't know this, and I share this a lot on my Facebook page. I'm always, that's kind of the most active place to find me. Is that there's a hierarchy in value when it comes to business, and maybe you've talked about this in the
Mm.
past. But the hierarchy of value essentially goes like this: it goes from commodity to product and service to experience to transformation.
Wow.
Okay, in that order. And
Mm.
everybody, what they're looking to do is, you're looking to level up in your value that you provide. Again, greatest thing to know about business is that, how do you produce world-class things, or how do you become a long-standing business, or how do you cut through the noise and break into a market or take over a market, is you
Mm.
provide more value than anybody else. So given that those four steps from commodity to product and service to experience to transformation, we all want to be moving up that ladder. And there's
Yeah.
all kinds of different, examples of this, whether that's Starbucks from the cup of coffee to the experience of the interaction, or whether that's, I watch these, there's one of these job commercials that I always watch, and what they're doing is that they're creating a life transformation in the commercial, right? It's like it's Indeed, where I don't know if you've ever seen these commercials, but they're great examples of how to shift the positioning from a service, which is like a job search engine, into a life transformation, because it's all dramatic and, dad said he was going to come home, and he's got to work, and oh wait, he just got a message from Indeed, and now his life has changed forever.
Yep.
Everybody's looking to shift that, right?
Yeah.
And in order to break through and to really, really take over a market, it's really about this idea of, how do I provide more value than anybody else? So how do I really provide transformation in a really clear definition for my clients on all the different levels, right? When you talk about raving fans, when you talk about culture, when you talk about, a ladder of value, like this program comes next and this program comes next, it's all based in your ability to produce a profound result, right? The ability to say, okay, come to the weekend. Hey, you came to the retreat, come to the weekend. Now come to the week long. Now come to the mastermind. Now come to the certification. Your ability to do that is based in your results. You can do all the marketing. And don't get me wrong, marketing, sales, all that stuff is incredibly important. You have to have that on the front end, right? All this stuff. And when they're with you, what are you doing with them? What are they going through? What are the processes that you're bringing them through that positions you as this is the best, this is the best thing I've ever experienced in my life.
Bee's knees.
That's what and it's predictable, right?
Yes.
When you plan it, it's predictable. And and this is the beauty about the science, is that it's predictable. I know that every single event that I run, someone's going to come up to me and say that I've been to Tony Robbins, I've been to, this person, this is the best program that I've ever been to, because I designed it that way. Dude. Right? Yeah.
This is so powerful. So we can create the science of transformation in live events. Are we also able to do this, just in coaching sessions virtually? Does it apply equally in both places?
Absolutely. I think as a coach, or as someone or a speaker, or anybody in the one-on-one space, the group coaching space, or the retreat space, transformation has to be the focal point. And there's a lot of things to be said about that. But I'll speak generally. I like to go big picture and then kind of more specific, because it does get really specific, as you can imagine. Big picture is, there's two parts of transformation. One is design, designing the transformation, and the other one is orchestrating. Okay, so if I think about that from a one-on-one level, it's like, let me just lay out my one-on-one program. This is my expertise. This is what I'm the best in the world in. And this is a big piece that people don't always get in the beginning. And maybe not only in the beginning, but a lot of times if you're stuck in that one-on-one place, part of the reason is that you haven't really pinpointed what you're the best in the world in. And in today's market, you really have to be in the best in the world, because you're no longer competing with the people in your region. Right? You're competing with you're competing globally. Right? And so a lot of people say, well, where do I go for that? Right? Do I go to certifications, or do I have to study with these people? And that's a great way to do it. But there's another process. There's a process of looking at your own experience and say, what is it that I am an expert in? And, if you look on my Facebook page or any of the stuff I've done, one of the things I talk about a lot is this process called the timeline process, where you're able to identify what my expertise is and how do I actually accentuate that expertise and lead in that space. And a lot of times it has to do with your pain, has to do with your traumas, has to do with those things that have happened to me in my life. Right? My father did this, my mother did this happened to me. And if we can reframe the way that we see those things about ourselves and how we position ourselves in that story, then we can actually be a really powerful mentor to coach people through that space one-on-one. Right? And this is kind of the ladder. And I always suggest that people, if you're a coach and you're working one-on-one and you want to move up that ladder of, one-on-one into group, into retreats, that you always start one-on-one and really hone in, like, what is the thing that changes people's lives every single time? And when you find yourself saying the same thing over and over and over and over again to every single one of your clients, day in and day out, hour by hour, then it's like, okay, cool. Found it.
Secret sauce.
I found it. Awesome. And it needs to be one of those things that, the old model of coaching, as an example, is, a lot of people, let me be intuitive, let me just kind of see what shows up, and I'll coach and I'll go through that process and all that kind of stuff. And that stuff is great.
Mhm.
Problem is that you can't leverage any of
It's not repeatable. It's not duplicatable. It's not scalable. Come on, freedom.
it. Biggest problem. Biggest problem. So I tell people from a one-on-one level, start crafting your transformation already. And the
Mm.
easiest place to look is to look into what are your processes? What are the processes, experiences that you can bring people through? So we
Mm.
work with a lot of people who are, healers and coaches and,
Yep.
people who have different healing, fitness modalities, wellness professionals, people like this. And they really passionate about making a difference and just need to identify how to deepen their process. Right? If you think about transformation as an experience, right? Every transformation that we've ever had in our life, whether it's inside or outside of the program, it's been experiential. This transformation is not something that someone gives to you. Here's a transformation, bud. Enjoy it. It's something that you experience. And travel is a great topic of that because the experience of travel in itself, different place, different language, different food, different culture, different way of thinking, different way of interacting, causes me to reflect differently about who I am. It's transformational, right? But it's multisensory. And one of the things that we got to do as on all levels, coaches, group coaches, online programs or retreats, is to think about that. Not only what are the senses that are being included in what's happening, but how do I orchestrate? The beautiful thing about events and the beautiful thing even about programs is like, how do I orchestrate these things happening? How do I orchestrate the environment? How do I orchestrate the social environment? How do I orchestrate the interactions? How do I put the pillars in place? And each one of them is different. And I hope I'm not, I'm so,
This is great. This is
so
great.
passionate about
Yeah.
all the different levels, and there's so much information in each
Yeah.
one, right? And you got to
Yeah.
remember that it is each one differentiates, but each one there's a line that connects them all, and that line is transformation. So there's a pattern of how you create transformation in all three, and I'm using three as the one-on-one, some type of group training, and then the retreats. There's a pattern of how you create that, and each one differentiates in a big way.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is that you want to, again, process based, and also thinking about two things. What's the design and what's the orchestration? So from a one-on-one perspective, idea could be like, hey, you know what? This is the structure of my one-on-one program. And
Right.
the reason why I structure it this way is because I want to make sure that I start to identify the leverageable pieces. So we're going to go through this experience, and I'm going to ask some questions, and we're going to do some processing. I'm still going to leave some time for my intuitive, right? And we might do that, maybe it's a 10-week program, maybe it's a 12-week program, maybe it's an 8-week program, but we're going through this one-on-one. And during this 8-week program, you're going to go through X, Y, and Z processes. And these are the processes that I'm a leading expert in because of my own life experience, because of all my certifications, because of my years and years of results within my life or within my clients' lives. Okay. And then as you go through that process, one of the things that you're doing is you're looking to deepen the experience. And really from a one-on-one perspective, it's either you're hands-on with someone, you're doing something, you're bringing somebody through something, or you're in a deep conversation and a deep questioning of, getting people to understand the full scope or the full vision of what they're experiencing. Does that make sense?
This is so powerful. Bucky, this is great. So I want to recap. Transformation is two components, design and orchestration, which I think
Yes.
it's important to have the design of like, hey, what are you an expert on? How do you actually design the program, which is great.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can do that pretty well, right? Like a lot of people online, yeah, you could build a program. Orchestration is like, do you get the magic in the execution of the design, which is like a completely different conversation, which I think probably more people struggle with than the just thinking up the bullet points and the lessons and the curriculum. It's the actual transference of transformation through that.
Yeah, and there's a whole process there as well. And one of the things is that it's experience driven, right? That process of orchestration is experience driven, and this is why everybody's got to. No one can do the push-ups for you, right? We can give you the insights into how to do the push-ups, the insights into ways to maximize the movements, but we can't do the push-ups for you. So a big part of the orchestration really comes from experience. But I'll go into that a little bit. One of the things that I do want to say about the design space is whether it's a one-on-one program, a group training, or a live event, it's design really is driven by outcome, right? It's not driven by vision of like, hey, this is what I want to create. It's what are my outcomes for my participants. So by the end of this retreat, these people are going to be walking out saying these things, not just by the retreat, but by day one. By day one, they're going to be walking out saying this. By 10 o'clock on day one, they're going to be walking out saying this. Right? By day two, they're going to be saying this. By day three, they're going to be saying that. If someone walked up to them and said, hey, what's going on in there? They're going to say X, Y, and Z. That's the design, right? And then the orchestration of that is, that's the facilitation. There's a big difference between presentation versus facilitation. And this is one of the things that I teach all my clients is that, a lot of presenters out there, a lot of people can put up a PowerPoint and say, hey, this is what it is. Bing, 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 bing. It's meaningful stuff, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Not a lot of facilitators out there.
Mm-hmm.
And the big difference is that a facilitator is facilitating a process. There is a process that I'm engaging people in order for them to have an experience. I'm facilitating the process. And it's an interesting shift of public speaking because a lot of people view themselves as public speaker. They say, "Oh, I'm the one. I'm on stage. I'm the speaker." There's all this ego about being a speaker, right? And facilitation is you actually flip it. You put the priority on the individual or on the audience, and your role is to guide them through this. It's like have you ever been on you ever been on some type of adventure where you're river rafting or you're going skydiving, or it's not about the guide, right? The guide is there to lead you through different elements and say, hey, this is the stuff, this is what we're going to do, here's to pay attention to this, and then they're there to accentuate your experience.
Yeah.
And that's a really good way to look at facilitation versus presentation. But orchestration also, you think about a conductor, right? Think about all the different elements that are in a orchestra. And your job as the facilitator is to have full awareness beyond, you can imagine an audience, right? And they're going to an opera or whatever it is, and they're listening to the orchestra play. And you're the conductor, right? You have total awareness of all the different elements, right? And your job is to create this seamless experience by manipulating all these different elements: the physical environment, the lighting, the sounds, the way that you speak, the way that you stand, right? The questions that you ask, the interactions that you're having, all these things in order to deepen this experience that you're facilitating for your group.
Wow, dude, and there's so many things that people could pay attention to in the facilitation, in the orchestration of that, man. Like, I'm sure it could be so overwhelming, or people are just like, I'm just going to do my best, and then they don't actually deliver on the intention and what's possible for their clients. How do you advise those people, man?
Well, it's all step by step, right? Science is step by step. So it's like in a lot of ways, it takes a meticulous kind of mind, but there's a lot of freedom in that. A lot of people, when they're first speaking or when they're speaking, they want to come a lot from the intuitive space, just like coaching. And in some ways, that's really important. And always in every single workshop for every single one of the people I coach, that always has to be a part of what you do, because that's your genius. Right. And if you're not spending that time, I know that you just ended the conversation with Kate. She was talking about flow state, right? Yep. For me, I call it time with spirit, right? I call it third party intervention, right? Third party intervention. When you get fully present, then third party shows up and it's like, dude, I'm not up there speaking. That's God time. That's universe time. That's, the divine time.
Yeah.
And there's always those moments of things that show up that I never planned up because of my willingness to plan. I get to experience the things I never could plan for because of my willingness to plan. I'm not caught up in like, what's going on next or what's happening. A big part of the orchestration is understanding the by minute flow and understanding, hey, this is going into this and this is going to this. And specifically, here's the biggest thing I would say. And if, I know that we don't have a ton of time, but what I would do with clients is I would go through the entire checklist, from message to content to experiences to facilitation to tone to nonverbal communication to music to lighting to the whole thing. I mean, if you really want to do high level experiences, think about, I use Tony Robbins as an example because he's a leader in the industry, right? And a lot of people have been to those events. But think about something like the Dickens process, or think about firewalking, or think about these experiences that you go through. There's an entire orchestration. Think about just the opening sequence, right? There's an entire orchestration: sound, lighting, music, everything. Like there's a whole thing. And those are the things that you want to bring to your event with that level of awareness. And one of the things that you have to realize is that those aren't just things that people said, oh, this is a good idea. There's a why behind every single one of the things that they're doing. And that why is directly tied to the outcome that you've put into your design. So the two tie together very intimately. So when I say, okay, this is my outcome, I'm going to know that these are the things that they're going to be doing. And the reason why it's predictable is because these are all the things that are in place that lead back to that outcome. Right, that tie in your expertise, that tie in the outcome of your clients. And these are the things, that level of detail is what separates people dramatically. Dramatically. These are the secrets that people don't know. And I'll go into, I'm excited to go into some of that within the models of accelerated learning. But these are the things that people don't know. People just kind of organizing stuff and saying, oh, this would be kind of cool. And I think that I've seen this done before. And, it's like, it's just a different ball game. And if you want to have an explosive business, right, you got to do the front end stuff. Don't get me wrong. You got to get the people there. You got to do all the stuff to get people there. But once they're there, if you want to have an explosive business into the rest of your ladder of value, providing deep transformation at the highest level in your industry is the way to do it.
Dude, so powerful, so powerful. So I want to talk about the science of transformation, the accelerated learning. What are some keys to really create that accelerated learning space? Is it what you're talking about with like the lighting and the music and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, I'll go back to the Georgi Lozanov story, right? And
Okay.
I'll share with you guys maybe 3 of the 5 tenets. And there's all kinds of principles that are associated to this. If you want to check it out, there's a great book. It's called Quantum Learning for Teachers. Okay,
Mm.
Quantum Learning for Teachers. It's a lot of where my training comes from. Big shout out to Supercamp. I worked with those guys for 16 years, and this is where they work directly with Georgie. And if you've ever heard of the Money and You program, Money and You program was a thing that my father was involved with a long time ago. Actually, Tony was one of the team leaders at Supercamp. Money and You produced a bunch of facilitators, Robert Kiyosaki, T. Harv Eker, my father, but a bunch of people came through that accelerated facilitate. When you see people facilitate, asking questions and this type of facilitation, that's really the genesis from it. It comes from a school that was developed, business school that was developed in the 1970s in Vermont called the Brooklyn Business School. And Money and You came out of it, Business and You came out of it, and Supercamp came out of it. But they were the people that brought Georgi Lozanov from Bulgaria. They stayed and, along with other people, and they did this thing early on. So I'll give you 3 tenets, which are really important, 3 of the 5 tenets, but you got to realize if you get that book, you'll see how there's foundations of principles that make up this body of work, right? Yeah. So this is one of many. Right. First tenet, but this is the big one. First tenet is that everything speaks. Okay, so everything speaks. Right, the way that you dress, the lighting, the tablecloths, the plants, the no plants, the way that the rooms, everything's sending a message. Okay, everything in the environment, the way that person looked at me, the way that staff member welcomed me, the way that I parked, and the signing and the location, everything speaks. Right, so one of the things that you have to be mindful of is that and these first 2 kind of go together, is that everything is communicating either towards or away from your outcome. Mm-hmm. Right. So the other thing, the second tenet, is that everything's on purpose, right? So there's a why behind everything that we do. We do this piece. Why? Because of this. We put this sign up here. Why? Because of this. We have the parking here. Why? Because of this. We picked this location. Why? Because of this. I wore this shirt. I mean, you can get really meticulous about it. I think that there's a balance between how meticulous you can get where you still feel like you have freedom, right? Still have the freedom to be yourself, because you don't, the other thing that, as a byproduct, some of what happens, I've seen that in that culture as well, is that people try to turn into the robot.
Yeah,
right?
Robot.
And I think from a design standpoint and an orchestration standpoint, you want to have a solid foundation of that. And you also want to have enough in place where you can afford yourself the freedom to do whatever you feel is right in the moment. Yeah. Right. There's always that time of like, hey, this is what's showing up, and I'm going to cross that threshold and go there.
Well, I hear master the basics until you can say, okay, I know which basics have to be there and which ones I can flourish on and do whatever I want on.
Correct. Yeah. Afford yourself the freedom. When do you, it's so funny. I used to go through these pretty hardcore facilitated trainings where they used to like drill us on like every little thing, like stand like this, stand like this, stand like this. Like, all like you couldn't even, I got this 30-minute presentation. I remember I was doing a facilitated training and I had like this 30-minute presentation. I was super excited about it. Like all these people there. And I had a 30-minute, I was like ready to do my 30 minutes. I got through literally 3 minutes over in half an hour. And I got half an hour of coaching on 3 minutes of content. Wow. Right. And they used to have a saying in back in the day when I was doing this, you don't really see this culture anymore, but it was like this piece on, your ego comes second to the outcome. Like, I don't care if you feel bad. Yeah. Your ego comes second to the outcome. That's how important it is. Wow. Right. You want to do this at a very high level. Your ego comes second. Right. So this is where, going into that conversation of mentorship and high level mentorship, that 30 minutes on that 3 minutes changed my entire perspective of who I was as a facilitator. Yeah. Right. And the level of detail that went into everything. And within that 30 minutes on a 3-minute section, there was so many valuable things that I still use today. And this is the power of high level mentorship, is that you think that, hey, I got the 30 minutes. Right, I'm gonna do this 30-minute thing. I got the events company. I got the coaching program. I'm super excited. And when you get that lasered mentorship on the specifics of those things, that's what makes it explosive from
Yeah.
a business standpoint, from an impact standpoint, from a fulfillment standpoint,
Mm,
because it's all those little subtle shifts within that little time frame that make
mm.
all the difference in the entire process.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've seen that the mentorship and the coaching, when it focuses on something, they're coaching on it for a reason. It's not
Right.
just because they want to hear themselves talk, but they're like, hey, when I coach you on this and you change it, like it changes everything about the dynamic of the outcome. And the outcome is first, your ego is second.
Yeah, it's a huge
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So going back into the science, and I'll go back into these very important things. So if you're running a retreat out there, first of all, is it okay if I ask questions on here?
Please. Yes.
Yeah. So if I love Facebook Lives, I love podcasts because of the interaction, right? So
Yeah.
big part of this is interacting, and I'm interested in where you're at and what you're doing. So if you're running retreats and you have questions, ask questions. I always go back and I always try to provide value. And the more that you participate, the more that I'll show up and I'll say, okay, cool, this is what's going on. I'm like all about the free flow of
Yeah.
just being in the abundance of like, hey, you know what? A long time ago, I decided that shifting the consciousness of humanity was really a big part of my purpose, not only from a personal standpoint, but from when you're gifted with a life experience and that leads to a specific skill set. That's
Yeah.
like, man, this is really powerful. This is really impactful. This literally expands and maximizes everybody's impact and voice from like, this is something that I've thought about, and this is where my clients come to me. I've been thinking about this for a long time, or I've been doing this and I want to pivot, and I'm really, have all these ideas
Mm.
to this point of like global impact, like, major influences. I've done a lot of work in Australia because I lived in Bali for 5 years, but
Wow.
amazing what this skill can do in your level of confidence, your level of impact, your level of fulfillment, and your level of income. So, I'm all about that free flow. If you have questions, ask questions below. The example what I was going to share was talking about events. So, kind of forgot, I got on a tangent, but I'll go back to I'll go on the science for a little bit. So everything speaks, everything's on purpose. Okay. And that's a whole conversation. And then within that, experience before label is the third
Mm.
tenet.
Mm.
And a lot of people, when it comes to teaching, they're using a traditional model. First of all, here's the number one thing I got to say about live events: let go of the panel model. I don't know how many of you guys do panels, but just let go of it, please. Like, that's such it's an old model. It's what people do when they don't know how to create transformation. They get a bunch of people. It's a marketing strategy. Here's a bunch of people.
Yep.
Here, come and experience all these people. And people, like, I can feel, the resistance in my entire body when I see something like that. And I don't know if that's true for you guys, but,
That's
I think the
powerful.
time of sitting and listening and
Mm.
being inspired is done.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not here to be inspired, right? Like,
Mm.
it's great. I can get inspired on YouTube. I don't need to spend money and go somewhere to be inspired. I want to be transformed. I want my life to be different, right? I want to come back a different person. I want my molecular structure to be literally different in my body. I want to be a different person. Like, I'm
Yup.
done with this stuff. I'm done
Yup.
with this pain. I'm done with the suffering. I'm ready to transform. And again, when you position yourself that way, it becomes a very different game. So experience before label, right? Experience before label is based on the premise that, again, transformation is an experience. And a lot of people will go into, hey, you know what? We're going to do a sound bath, right? Or
Mm.
we're going to do a transformational yoga class, or we're going to do this thing.
Mm.
One of the things that you want to do in the orchestration is that you want to invite people into an experience without having them know what the experience is.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, think about going to travel, right? We're on the topic of travel. It's like you have your perception of what's going to happen, but part of the thing that's so fun about it is you have no idea. You have no idea.
Mm.
There's so much unknown, and there's so much discovery that's
Yeah.
taking place.
Yeah.
And the discovery energy and the discovery mindset is really important when it comes to transformation. This idea of there's something unfolding, there's something that's taking place. I'm exploring, discovering energy within myself. And how do I orchestrate that? The worst way to do it is to say, this is what we're going to do, and this is what the outcomes are going to be. And I know that sometimes in a safety standpoint, you got to do that, right? You kind of talk about that, but as much as possible, you want to engage people into an experience where their outcome, their transformation is unfolding. It's happening in real time. Because that's the essence. It's like, I always liken it to, part of the work as an orchestrator or facilitator is it's kind of like that movie Inception. I know that's an old movie, right?
I love it.
Yeah, right. I can reference the movie Inception, where they're trying to plant the idea and have him perceive as if it was his own. As a facilitator, orchestrator of transformation, you know, right, what idea you're planning, and it has its opportunity to blossom and be individualized. But there's definitely patterns. If I go through this experience in this way, there's gonna be a pattern of outcomes. And some people might relate it to different stories in their life, but there's going to be a pattern of outcomes. So what you want to do in a very subtle and, you know, not so obvious to the audience, but very obvious to you, is you want to orchestrate an engagement and an opportunity for them to engage in the experience and really discover what's there for them.
It's like being in wonder, impossibility, and discovery. It's like the whole way. It's like magical, you know. It's like it's magic. How do you bring magic to that instead of saying, "Here's what you're gonna get. Here are the steps. All right, let's do it." It's like there's no more magic to that. There's no more curiosity. There's no more, because like when they detach from that, then it's like just black and white. Okay, like let's go through the motions. Let's be a robot versus like I'm a creator of my reality. Like what do I get to play with? What do I get to have fun with next?
Yeah, it's a huge thing because a lot of people also, you know, they rely on experience. And I've seen this all over Asia. I don't know how much time you spend in Asia, but one of the big famous things in Asia is that you come to the States, you watch what's going on, and you replicate it without the proper training. You say, okay, someone did a board break, I'm going to do a board break. Someone did a trust fall, I'm going to do a trust fall, right? And, you know, it became, from my experience, because I spent a lot of time there, it became one of my pet peeves. And I think if that's your model, it's a very difficult one because they're empty experiences, right? The experience by itself is not the answer, right? Wow. Best case scenario, by the way, is that you look at your own process, you look at your own expertise. Again, if you're running events, you got to be an expert on all different levels. If you're going to do this work transformation, you have to be an expert. What I mean by that is you can get predictable results every single time. You know that if I do these things, you're going to get these results every single time. Maybe not every single, 90% of the time, right? There's that 10% of people who are unwilling to do the work, but when people do the work, you get this result, okay? Breaking down your process and saying, okay, how do I expand my process? How do I expand my process so that it becomes more experiential? How do I, you know, it's a very interesting challenge that I had with someone who was doing juice fast for a long time. And he's like, I got all this content, all this information, all this stuff about the body. How do you make it experiential, right? How do I make this curriculum experiential in my life and have all these experiences that are associated to them? But best case scenario is that you're not necessarily taking these external things, but you're developing your own signature processes based on your content. That's also what's going to differentiate you. When you have your signature process or you have your 7 steps, every great person, the difference between, you know, I do posts on this all the time. The difference between you and Tony Robbins is he's got a signature process. The difference between you and the people who are making 6-7 figures is they got a signature process. They got a signature curriculum. Right? It's a big part of this work is identifying and clarifying that this is my message and this is what I'm the best in the world in. And here's the step-by-step processes, right? And I haven't talked about this, and you know, I know there's a lot of information. This is kind of like,
great, dude. This is gold. I think it's just opening up possibilities for people saying, "Hey, I don't know what I don't know, Bucky. How do I get the results?"
yeah. And I'm, you know, again, I'm passionate about it. I'm trying to give you guys as much as I can. And when I work together, it's very step by step. And this is one of the things that you got to remember. It's very step by step. But think about this, okay? We've talked about some big things. We've talked about the hierarchy of value. We've talked about the separation between design and orchestration. We've talked about, you know, specifically facilitation versus presentation. Okay. We've talked about, you know, the step-by-step, the tenets of accelerated learning. That's an example of how you stack information to produce an outcome. All right. Now, what you want to think about within your signature processes and within your event is what are all the different things that we're stacking to produce this outcome? Right. And within that, here's a very important distinction. Write this down. What is the gradient in which it's being stacked? Right. Because participation, okay, when it comes to learning, when it comes to transformation, participation is king or queen. Okay. Without participation, there is no transformation.
Yep.
Okay. And gradient is a very important part of participation. There's all different ways to gauge transformation. I'll share with you another model. Maybe this one's a little bit difficult. I'll try to hold it up. Maybe I'll hold up a picture so you guys can see it. It's called the success model. All right. This is, again, also from Quantum Learning for Teachers. Get that book. But I want to share with you from an orchestration standpoint because it's really important. And it all has to do with gradient and how do I have the relentless pursuit of participation as an orchestrator of an experience. Knowing that every one of my outcomes in my design, every one of my results, every one of my transformation, every one of the things that the people are going to walk away, all the testimonials are tied directly to their willingness to participate.
Yep.
Okay. This is a way to gauge this. Rewind a little bit. Participation, high participation, is built on a foundation of safety, trust, and belonging. Without relationship, without connection, without emotional trust, without physical trust, participation is going to go real down. And it has to do with these two things. And I'll write it. And maybe this is kind of a cheesy thing to do, but I'll go ahead and do it. And I'm going to hold up one of these manila notepads. These are the things that, I don't know if you grew up with these things. I grew up with these things. My dad had them everywhere. And I saw them at Staples. And I was like, yes, I'm going to buy like 20 of those things. So if you're writing this at home, write this down. It's an equal then, less than sign. It's really, really important. Okay. This is a huge thing. If you're a facilitator and you're running events and you want to increase your level of transformation, you got to increase your level of participation. And you got to have a relentless pursuit of participation if you want to produce an amazing outcome. Okay. Yeah. So on one side, okay, I'm just going to do this really quickly. On one side like this, you're going to write down participation. Write it down here. On the other side, you'll write down perception of risk. Okay, perception of risk. So this is how it works. All right. When the perception of risk is high, participation is low. Yep. When this perception of risk is low, then participation is high. Okay. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean as an orchestrator? This is one little detail. Okay. These are the things that when you get to mastery level as a facilitator, these are the things that you're just doing. You're not thinking about it. These are just things that you're just naturally going into. And one of the things that I do with my clients is when they're running their first event, I'll help them to walk through the whole thing. I'll design the whole thing with them, and then I'll be with them, orchestrating the environment, cueing the music, communicating with them one-on-one, and then on the breaks, having little conversations with them and say, hey, do this, do this, do this, do this. But we spent months kind of going through the entire flow and making sure that everyone they're on board with what it all looks like. The entire team's on board with the whole thing. But it's a huge thing. So one of the things that you always got to do is that you have to have a real-time awareness to where the perception of risk is, or where the participation is. So if I ask a question and two people raise their hand, perception of risk is too high. Yep. Low participation, perception of risk needs to come down. How do I lower that? Is that I do that through a series of interactions. And the first one is large group share. Okay, large group share, I lower the perception of risk because I now have everybody share with each other. So what that sounds like is turn to the person next to you and share with them what you thought about the thing I just asked, right? Instead of doing the individual performance, how many of you da-da-da-da? What do you think about this? Or how many of you would be willing to do this, right? Nobody raises their hand, turn to the person next to you and share. Now, what does that do? Increases participation. Now, instead of one person participating, everyone's participating. The other thing I can do is I can ask a thought question. Think about what this means for you. Everyone's participating. Okay. Now I want to increase the gradient. This gradient piece is really, really important because the essence of transformation, the essence of growth is about your ability to stack gradient, your ability to step little bit by little bit by little bit by little bit outside of what you're comfortable with. And you have to orchestrate that as a facilitator, step by step by step by step, seamlessly. So it seems real easy. I'm just kind of going with the flow. It's super fun. It's awesome. I'm doing all this stuff. And now I'm fucking firewalking. And now I'm sharing things. You know what I mean? Like that's how that happens. It's just stacks. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in this huge experience. Yeah. And when I look back on the weekend, I can't even believe I did all that stuff. Wow. Right? Because your level of detail into the gradient, because you're always monitoring participation. So when you're getting the feedback they're not participating, you're then putting them into a sequence that puts them into high levels of participation. Dude. So that sequence, by the way, goes large group share, turn the person next to you, small group share, a little bit more formal, find a group of 3 or 4, into individual performance, highest gradient. Okay. Now, most impactful, when you can get a group to be, and you'll see this at really good events, when you can see an individual performance, when someone's being coached individually, but the entire group is engaged emotionally, that's the highest gradient. Okay, as far as performance, as far as that, because it is whole group, but it's deep within that space. And mastery level, when you talk about coaches, when you talk about facilitators, that's what they're doing. They're going straight through that sequence, and they're going straight into that, and everyone's present in the emotion of the individual, and that process is for everyone. they're all participating. Even if it's that one person that's being the metaphor, the vessel, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's engaged. It's hitting people. You're like, oh shit, like that was me and my. It's okay for me to cuss on this
Yes,
still.
yes, yes.
Okay, okay, cool. You know, like that's when you know that you're performing. But again, that is the stacking of the gradient. There's a sequence of events. If you go to any look, start to think like this. Okay, you start to go to events,
Mm-hmm.
and the events that you're like, man, that was an amazing event. Start to rewind from the very beginning, from the time that you purchased the ticket. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
even the time that before you purchased the ticket, the moment that you engaged with that event, what the sequence of events that took place. Okay, and think about this model of everything speaks and everything's on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and think about the stacking. Okay, the interactions with the salesperson, the buying of the ticket, the follow-up emails, the sequential emails, the showing up to the event, the registration, the person greeting you, the culture that was there, the music that you walked into, the community that was already there, the first introduction of the things that happened, the exercises that you did, and where you were led throughout the weekend. Okay, the best people in the world understand this science deeply, and that is the difference between you and them. That is the difference between the results that you want to get and the results that you're getting right now, is that they understand this and you don't. And you can look at it now that you have this lens and you can see, I see how that happened every single time. But there is, again, that book is a good reference. It's a starting point, the foundation.
Yeah.
But just like science, there's so much details. I went into, I could talk about this for 12 hours.
I believe it. I believe it, man. This is gold, dude. I wanna tell people, like, what are you working on? How can they work with you? How can they get to a live event? I want to just get them up to speed with that, because you're delivering so much freaking value, man. And they're like,
Totally.
dude, Bucky, you're blowing me away with this value, with this greatness. I know if I take that next step with you, you'll take me step by step, take me by the hand through these processes. But just tell us what you're working on, man.
Yeah. So, I got a couple different things going on. I would say from a value add perspective, find me on Facebook. That's the place where I live, right? I got Bucky O'Neill. Maybe it'll be in the comments here, but that's my address. I'm not so much on Instagram. I'm just starting on Instagram, but Facebook is where I live. I'm like, let me hit a live button and be on there for an hour, hour and a half every day. Like that's my jam. So find me on there. The other place, and when it comes to one-on-one, if this is resonate with you and you're like, dude, I need to reach out to these people, like I kind of do it old school. I like to connect with people, right? So if you're interested and you want to connect with me, send me a message. Just say, hey, what's up, man? I saw you on the show. I want to connect with you, have a conversation. Always happy to have a conversation. I'm only taking, as far as one-on-one, I maybe take a handful of those every single year, because it is a big cumbersome program to kind of do the full scale. I got an online program where I teach people how to grow a six-figure business online, doing what they love. A big part of my message is really about, finding that truth in you, and how do you live from that passion? How do you really be an expression of who you are? And how do you do, this piece called, I talked about the timeline exercise, but for me, it's called your design contribution. It's based on the philosophy that life isn't happening to us, life is happening for us. And every single thing in our life has been leading us to have lessons, to have the experiences, to have the expertise, so that we can really contribute to others. And if we can shift those things and identify those things, then we can leverage those things and make our life about that. So I talk about that a lot, especially, creating this business of soulful entrepreneurship, or becoming what my partner calls a soulful hustler. How do I become a soulful hustler in my life? How do I find that balance between the soul work and the business work, of the grind of the day to day, of the physical elements, and then match with the soulful elements, and this is who I am and this is who I'm supposed to be in the world. And how do I get the best of those things, right? Old paradigm is like one or the other. I either have to work the 9 to 5, or I get to be kind of the spiritual woo-woo person living on the mountain, right? Bring that together and realize that the new paradigm that's emerging is that it's all possible. It's all possible, especially with the resources and technologies, and how we can systemize things, and where people are turning to for advice. They're no longer turning to institutions, but they're turning to people who have done it. And that's what mentorship is, right? Mentorship and guiding is really about, what have I done and how do I reach my hand back and really bring people up? So that's another thing. If that's coming up for you, send me a message, and we'll connect. I love connecting with people. I want to make sure that energetically we're a good fit, and that this is something that's going to really work for you. So let's get on a call and have that conversation. And then the last thing, I just recently partnered with a guy. His name's Isaiah Fleecebach. He's out of Northern California. We started a company called The Empowered Man, which is pretty awesome. This kind of birthed out of inspiration. I saw him on Facebook. I sent him a message. He's like, I had a connection, went up to see him, and we created an events company. It's just starting. We haven't even ran our first event yet. It's happening on the 5th, which is in the next couple of days. And if you ever start an events company, right, there's all kinds of different challenges. But if you want to really experience a deep level of transformation, the process that we're using, it's incredible. First of all, let me address what's really going on for men and what this addresses is that so many of us, similar to my story, we have a culture of suppression. We have a culture of hiding. We have a culture of not allowing us to be the full version of who we are, because in some ways it's not masculine enough. It's not manly to do those things. And as a result, we experience a lot of pain. We experience a lot of anxiety. We experience a lot of self-harm, self-medication. It shows up and manifests in all the areas of our lives. And what's amazing about the work that I'm doing with Isaiah is that I have, 25 plus years in personal transformation. He has 25 plus years in transformational body work. Wow. And this is where it becomes really profound. And, jumping back and forth a little bit, by the way, when you can transform the physical, right? And I didn't get to mention this, and this is such a huge thing. I didn't mention this. It's such a huge thing. Really, what we're transforming, okay, is we're transforming people's states. Okay, we're transforming people's states. And when people talk about a transformation, they're talking about the transformation of their state: physical, mental, emotional, some would say spiritual. Okay, and the easiest way to shift that is actually by shifting the physical. That's why you go to a Tony Robbins event, you're jumping up and down the whole time. Yep. Doing this for 16 hours a day, that'll change your life. Yep. That'll change your life by itself. Yep. Right? Because it's the easiest thing to manipulate. It's the physical. So when I met Isaiah, I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. He's got this physical process that's been, based in 6,000 years of Chinese medicine, where every single organ, if you don't know Chinese medicine, this is really deep work. Every single organ, every single meridian, every single muscle group is related to not only the physical element, but also the emotional element, the psychological element. And I've spent so many years in personal development and doing all these exercises and fire walks and glass walks and all kinds of stuff, trust exercises. And I step into 2 minutes of this body work, and I step right into the awareness of my pain, right into the awareness of my trauma. Because what we don't realize is that all of that trauma, all of that suppression, all of that emotion is stored within the body. And we can do all the psychological work in the world, and unless we release it in the body, then we can't create a permanent shift. And that's one of the things that we face as leaders in this space, is that we face that we've done all the psychological stuff. We've done so many things and we still find ourselves in echoes of old patterns. Yep. Like, I thought I was over that shit. Like, I'm still doing that? Like, really? And part of the reason is that it's stored in the body. Wow. And the next level of that is by going straight after it, instead of doing the roundabout way. And we do the personal transformation and stuff as the priming, right? As the stacking to this work. But this work is a really profound work when you can just deep into it. And then you have a set of rituals, a new set of rituals that aren't about psychology. They're about physiology. Right. And it's a really beautiful work. It's a very masculine work, very cathartic work. It's very fatiguing physically. Very expressive emotionally, really, really powerful. You can check out the empoweredman.live, launching in LA. We'll be doing our first event in LA on Saturday the 5th.
Wow, so, dude, this is freaking powerful. Empoweredman.live. Bucky, dude, this is so, like, we channeled and focused so much freaking gold in this hour, man. Yeah, I see you just like going for it, fired up, man. I appreciate you like leaving it all on the court, dude. Like that's just who you are. I can feel it everywhere in your life, man. That's who you are. So, dude, I acknowledge you as a a relationship partner with your significant other, with Leah. She's been out there. Shout out to Leah. With your clients, with your people around you, your family, like everyone who's important to you, man. I just see you showing up. So thank you for showing up with us. Appreciate you bringing your full heart. And people, they can find you facebook.com/Bucky O'Neill, as well as empoweredman.live, right?
Yes, sir. Boom. Thank you, brother. Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for holding this space and allowing people to show up in their greatness and show up in their greatest purpose. It's a huge mission, and I commend you for being a stand in that truth. Such a privilege to be here and serve. Thank you, man.
Thank you, Bucky. We'll see you soon, okay?
Okay, bro.
All right, take care.
See you guys.